My upbringing has had a lot of influences on me. I would say mostly what has been like most important to who I am is like just being surrounded by so many different types of people. Being in New York City, like the entire spectrum of all humanity is like around you in your backyard. So I went to school with people like from Afghanistan, from like all over the Middle East, from all over like the United States. Like even people have come from the South, people from Mexico, people from like Spain, people from kind of like literally everywhere. And so like having access to different cultures and different ways of life and different like foods, different like languages was really formative for me, because I just had a chance to learn about other people and kind of how they live their life, and also at the same time put that in relation to myself and thinking about how I was raised and kind of my traditions and my culture, and kind of being able to learn about other people was really important for me, because then it's kind of like, okay, this is not just me, it's not just my community, it's not just my interests, it's all these other people. And also I think like a lot of the kind of like hate and racism stems from like ignorance and just literally not having any sort of exposure to any people that look differently than you or act differently from you. You just don't know. Fear comes from like the unknown, right? So if you actually like get to know someone, get to talk to them, and get to hear and like live their way of life, it becomes a much more inclusive community. It really shaped me a lot. I think I got my passion for kind of social justice issues like in Brooklyn, living in New York City. Just kind of the people I went to school with were very socially conscious people, like very politically active. Kind of like our after school conversations, I don't think were that of like the typical high school student. Like we would talk about like a lot of issues of diversity and inclusivity, and particularly in our school, like we had a bunch of different social justice oriented clubs. So kind of like I was doing a lot of that, and I was getting to work with a bunch of different people. So that kind of was my first like spark for like, oh, I'm really interested in like all sorts of social justice issues. And then I was a sociology major at my high school, so I had kind of like the first taste of like, okay, how are these social processes working? What are these systems and like the structure of society that's kind of causing whatever social and political issues. So that was really important for me and really inspiring, and I used kind of like all the knowledge from that and all of my experience just in talking to people about all this, coming from all different walks of life, and brought it here. And I noticed that when I came here, the Greek system had no sort of like, there was no outlet to discuss these issues that I was seeing as so like horrible. Like I didn't even want to join the Greek system in the first place, because all you hear on TV is like, oh, it's like all white people, all rich white people, and like they're super discriminatory. There's a history of like a lot of exclusion, right? So I was like, I don't want to do this. But then like coming from New York City, coming from like clubs and just having friends that talk about these issues, I was like, no, like we need to do something to change it. It's not good to just like stay from the outside and like pretend it's not there and ignore it. Like actively engage yourself. So kind of use those tools and that knowledge from growing up there and brought it here, and saw the opportunity to be the like vice president of community development. It was like the first time the Greek system at UC Berkeley kind of took a step in the right direction and step towards like making a more inclusive environment and community. A lot of it has been centered in the Greek community. So being like the vice president of community development there and working with people like all over the Greek system, not even just Panhellenic, but like Interfraternity Council, Multicultural Greek Council, National Panhellenic. So we did a lot of work with that, and a lot of political activism too. I'm like really passionate about women's issues, so just like a lot of protest, like Berkeley people protest, a lot of protests, like going to protests, going to like meetings, and like trying to, for like various different women's issues organizations, trying to come up with kind of policy first of all, and how we can inform, like keep people aware of all these issues. contrary to popular belief, I think that social media is like really, really impactful and really important in terms of social justice issues. Like I'm writing my thesis right now on how you can use social media and to participate in politics and to make some sort of change in the arena of social justice issues. So have tried to like kind of spread awareness of issues through my own personal social media accounts, and as well as like engaging with other people on social media. So like if I post a status about like the Trump administration's move to like take away birth control from people, like I'll post a status about that. Inevitably someone will comment and be like, this is stupid, I don't agree with this, and then we'll get into like, I'll engage with that person and try as best I can to just kind of speak to them in a normal manner and try to tell them let them hear what I have to say, I hear what they have to say, try to come to some sort of mutual understanding with them. So that's been a lot of, I think, like my work with social justice has been on social media. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not thinking of right now, but I think that it's been my main venues and outlets for my like social justice work here. So yeah, I was the first person in the position. It was created to be all things diversity, inclusivity, accessibility. So I got elected and I was like, okay, what's my first step? Like, what do you do to transform a system that has historically been so discriminatory and so exclusive and I don't know, just kind of awful towards a lot of people? What's the first step? And I thought, okay, I think we just need to start the conversation, because people deny it. They're like, no, this is Berkeley, like we're inclusive. And I'm like, no, we're not. Like there's a lot of exclusion going on. So just kind of doing things to like start conversations, bringing people together, letting a lot of voices be heard. So I did a bunch of things like workshops where I'd invite kind of everyone from the Greek community to come and talk about specific issues. So one was centered on like LGBTQ allyship, one was centered on like the experience as a person of color in the Greek community, one was centered on kind of like sexuality, one was centered on mental wellness. So kind of just a bunch of workshops where we could all come together and like discuss the fact that these issues exist and try and come up with some sort of methods or ways to help and move forward and progress and become more inclusive. So I did a lot of that. I kind of was in contact with a bunch of different people through the university. I was in contact with like the Multicultural Greek Council, with the National Panhellenic, with IFC, the Interfraternity Council, university personnel, and was kind of just trying to make connections with people, trying to hear as many voices as possible, see what people have to say. Because part of the job is coming up with policy, right? Like for the whole Greek system, it's the job was really deciding kind of what do we need to do to move forward, how can we implement a policy that will be like effective for the Greek system. So through those workshops and through my connections with other people, kind of coming up with ways to literally put into our code like how we're going to move forward. So for example, during recruitment, we changed the rules to say like, okay, you cannot require that women wear heels, you cannot require they have makeup, you can't require them to like look this certain part, which I thought was really, really, the Greek system is really exclusive when it comes to like what you need to look like. So that's an example of a policy that that we put forward. We did like cultural appropriation workshops. We mandated them, so meaning that like around Halloween every year, you have to like your chapter has to have some sort of presentation or workshop on what cultural appropriation is and kind of like methods for combating it and how we can kind of be more aware of how our actions can impact other people. What else was my job? Also, I think the community development position had an impact in like the other positions as well. So as in like sustainability and like the president and the vice president, kind of bringing just a general like awareness and thoughtfulness of how I can act and live and just kind of be someone who is trying to make the community more inclusive and more safe and more accessible and more comfortable, kind of putting that into like all the different positions and recruitment as well. Like I think just having these conversations and making people think before like having an event, let's make sure we're accessible with our food even. Let's make sure that we're asking people's pronouns. Let's make sure that this is something that is going to be safe and comfortable space for everyone. So a lot of that was just kind of making sure that the whole council and all of the positions were on the same page as me with these issues. A lot of it was yelling at frat boys. Like, honestly, I think the fraternity system is kind of not equal with sororities in terms of, like, progress. Kind of they're a little bit more on the traditional side than with the sorority, so they didn't even, like, they got the community development position after Panhellenic did, after the sororities did, largely because I really pushed them to. Like, they didn't even want to have a position that dealt with diversity, inclusivity, accessibility. Like, that wasn't even on their minds, so really to push for that to happen. I went to a bunch of fraternities to do cultural appropriation workshops and just kind of talk to their presidents and their social chairs and their members about methods for being more inclusive. A lot of the times there was pushback and they were not so comfortable with dealing with these issues, so a lot of my job was kind of trying to remain calm, telling them, like, these are the issues we're facing, like, please stop denying them, they're here, let's talk about it. So that was a lot of my job as well. And yeah, I think in general I got a lot of support for it. It was really awesome. I had a whole committee of people, like one person from each chapter, each sorority chapter, working with me towards, like, all these issues that we care about. So there's a lot going on. It's obviously like a huge umbrella of issues. I think people are reluctant to admit that a problem exists in the first place, because once you admit that there's a problem, you kind of have to put it on yourself to change it, and people kind of deny or, like, turn, like, a blind eye to issues that are going on. For example, when I did cultural appropriation workshops, a lot of the times people would be like, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't a problem. I don't even know what this is. This is silly. It's just a Halloween costume. So people just don't even want to realize that these issues exist. They don't want to put, like, the onus on themselves, essentially. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is being just comfortable with the way things are. And also at the same time, a lot of these fraternity men have never had to, like, face any issues of have never had to face any, like, discriminatory actions, have never had to be uncomfortable in the spaces that they're in. So because of that, it's like, oh, well, there's no problem. I've been totally fine. My friends have been totally fine. The issues don't exist. So I think a lot of it is that as well. Yeah, I think the resistance to change came from both sororities and fraternities. On the sorority side, a lot of the resistance was from the council itself. Kind of a lot of stuff that I wanted to change or things that I proposed were just not deemed acceptable by a lot of, like, university people that worked with us. I think a lot of the change that needs to happen, I guess, would be deemed as more radical, so people are less willing to kind of take the steps necessary to change things. So I received pushback from kind of, like, university personnel in that regard. I think mostly in general, though, like, sorority women were really supportive of this kind of movement, and were more or less, like, when I did have conversations with people, like, very much understanding of these issues and wanting to change and wanting to help. So I think mostly sorority women were great about it. It was definitely, like, the fraternity men where I received the most pushback and the most kind of denial, like, outright denial of these issues was from the fraternity men, unfortunately. I think it can look a million different ways. I don't think there's one method necessarily of being an ally. It really just depends on your ability and your skill and, like, what you think you can excel in. I personally think that I'm really good at, like, studying these issues and understanding the, like, systems behind it and the structure behind it, like, because I'm a sociology student. So I can understand, for example, that certain policies that are part of, like, political systems or whatever have certain impacts. So hopefully when I finish my education here, we'll be able to like develop policy that can be really effective and really impactful. But other people maybe are really good at protesting. They're really good at like being on the front lines of a protest and being loud and being like there and talking to other people. So like that's a method of being an ally. Some people are really good at social media. They have like 1 million followers and they have people listening to them and paying attention to them, so they can use their social media to kind of spread awareness and spread knowledge and have conversations. There's a lot of ways to do it, but allyship to me just means being aware, making sure you're constantly staying informed, listening to other people, and not just other people that look like you, but other voices, just kind of other perspectives that are different from mine. Because yes, I kind of study these issues, but I don't know even half of what like all of these social justice issues are, right? Like I just think it's really important to make sure I'm keeping in contact and talking to a whole bunch of different people about what issues they care about. And yeah, just staying informed I think is a really big part of allyship. And yeah, it's hard to kind of define it because I think it can take so many forms, but I just seeing it as being there for like my fellow human beings. Being informed can be really helpful for these movements because I think, as I said earlier, a lot of these issues stem from ignorance and literally just not knowing or not understanding the struggles of other people. So I'll just go back to this like cultural appropriation thing. Just not knowing that it's not okay to dress up as a Native American on Halloween because your whole entire life you've seen it all around you and like your friends do it and it's just like this normal part of your life. But then when you're educated on these issues and you're like, no, this is actually super offensive to a huge group of people, this is not okay, you become aware of it and you stop doing it, or you see someone else doing it and you have a conversation with them. So I think a lot of it just comes from learning and kind of having to like deconstruct the education that you've had thus far your entire life and think differently and think in new ways is a really big part of it. I love RJ. I think it is so amazing. It's so simple, yet it's so like powerful. Something like when you get into a conflict with someone, your first thought is not like, let me ask them how they're feeling about this. Your first thought is like, I'm heated, this is an argument, like I'm gonna say whatever I want. But if you can like take a second and step back and just be like, what are my interests? What are these people's interests, or whoever this person is, and really try and come to an understanding, that is so important. Because if you are hostile and you are aggressive and you just shut yourself off from the other person's perspective, you're never going to learn anything new. And in fact, you're going to walk away from that argument just angry and probably more set in your own ways than when you started. So literally just like asking the question, like, how do you feel you were harmed? Listening to everything they say, not interrupting, not talking over the person, and being like, okay, well now this is how I feel. And then at the end being like, how are we going to work towards fixing this, whatever this issue is? Although it is simple, is so impactful. Like I've used like those type of tools with so many different situations. Arguing with like my parents over something stupid, arguing with my neighbors, like whatever it is, if there is a conflict, like literally having a set of questions and a way to deal with it and thinking about it in your head has been so helpful, because despite those being simple questions, they just don't really come up when you like naturally, intuitively, when you're having a conversation with someone. And once you do that, and once you actually decide to just listen to what the other person has to say, think about what you want to say and say that in like an appropriate and calm way, and then working together after that to come up with a solution, is going to be the best way to move forward, I think. I don't think you can do it any other way, honestly. Other methods of like conflict resolution that people just naturally go towards can cause a lot of issues, and I think it takes a lot to be like calm and to remember that there are other perspectives. But once you do and you keep practicing it and you keep using like these methods in everyday life, like you'll see a change in how people interact with you and how people take the things you're trying to say. And on top of that, Berkeley students are known for being super political and super heated and super passionate about all these issues, and a lot of times they can come off as aggressive or hostile or intolerant even of other perspectives. But if you're using these tools of RJ and communicating with people in like appropriate and productive manner, then your message gets across way better, and it's way more impactful for like versus just like being hostile, because then people get mad and they don't want to hear what you have to say. So I have found it really helpful for all sorts of conflict in my life and other people's. Another important part of allyship is a lot of times when people try and be allies, they can still do it in an offensive way where they're just like not really. For example, with the Women's March, like yes, you were there to march for women, but are you also making sure that your feminism is intersectional? So really making sure to pay attention when people criticize your allyship or like tell you, yes, you're doing this, but you also need to be doing this and this, and thinking of all these other people, making sure you really take that in and really understand that and really try to have as many different perspectives, as many different voices as possible, because allyship can be really narrow sometimes and people can only care about kind of their group of people or a small narrow set of people, but taking care to make sure that you're being as intersectional as possible and being as aware of like the multitude of issues with whatever you're dealing with is really important. Just kind of listening. I think most of my knowledge, most of my allyship has literally just been listening, and just like hearing what people have to say and growing and learning from that. Both. Like, for example, I am an ally who is like, I have the privilege of having a great education at UC Berkeley. Like, my family has enough money for me to eat and kind of participate in activities I want to participate in and travel. So like me coming from that place of privilege is like it's even way more important for me to be able to hear like other perspectives and other voices and have people talk to me about like how I can be a better ally and how I can like better my actions to make sure that my allyship is actually making an impact. But I think it works always. Whoever is an ally for whatever they are an ally for can benefit from like hearing what other people have to say, even if it kind of goes against what they had previously been doing or kind of conflicts with whatever form their allyship takes.